I love that you said there will be so many questions. So let's start talking about the idea of questions.
Yeah.
In the age of AI,
Right.
where the technology has all the answers, it has never been more important that we ask the right questions. I told a room full of people at a conference recently, young people, I said the equivalent of Google search versus asking AI is like boiling a kettle versus leaving on the immersion in terms of the electricity that it's using. This was pre-deep sea. And so anyway, and I said to them, I said, I want you to treat ChatGPT like Aladdin and the lamp. Imagine you only have 3 goals at asking the right question, and you're only allowed to ask 3 questions a day. So it makes them concentrate really hard on not asking stupid questions. But because we're at a conference, I have to say there's no stupid questions, so feel free to ask them those questions. My questions will be stupid, because I am not an expert, which makes me an excellent question asker. So anyway, I would like to start by asking you all to introduce yourselves. Anyone who has not met you guys before, we will start at the end. Mike.
I just want to say briefly, if you want to use ChatGPT to generate questions for the session, I'm not opposed to it. So again, we're open to all kinds of different solutions there. Yeah. But Mike Gifford, Open Standards and Practices lead at CivicActions. I'm a Canadian CivicActions, an American organization, but I live and work in Ottawa, Canada. And I also work, I'm a triple core accessibility maintainer. I'm a WC3 invited expert. I'm on the Web Sustainability Working Group. And yeah, very interested in open source and collaboration, because we've got so many critical issues that we need to solve, and we have to work together in order to make them happen. So
thank you so much for that, and I'm really glad you're on this panel, because we've got some kind of, there's a lot to discuss, and the word civic and action in the same word. It does what it says on the tin, right? So we're going to talk about your tin in a minute. Sayeed, you have been busy. You have already done an AI stream about 10 minutes ago. Welcome to another stream. I just want to know, you need to score me afterwards, for moderating. Best questions, me or the other guy. Go on, I don't know if I'm clear.
I'm Sayeed Choudhury from Carnegie Mellon University. I'm the Associate Dean for Digital Infrastructure, and also the head of the Open Source Programs Office there, and also the director of something called the Open Forum for AI. But probably in the context of this session, I'm thinking a great deal about how not just my university, but universities in the US can focus on better types of impact from open source and interfacing with other sectors like the government and the private sector.
I have to say, so we have not met before, despite best efforts, to be fair. We're trying to be very organised. But I have noticed in my notes that you've done some work with the City of Paris, which is my spiritual home.
Oh, okay.
I live in Mullingar, but I traded in Mullingar for the Moulin Rouge for a month one time. And so I'm very committed to all experiences of the City of Paris, particularly from a data perspective, which I want to talk to you about. John.
So, hi everybody, I'm Joan. I'm the Chief Technologist for the Tech Division within IDEA Ireland, which is the foreign direct investment agency that brings all the multinationals into Ireland within that. And my remit is very much working with companies around R&D and research and innovation. And particularly a nice part into this side is linking into the university sector and the industry side, and how does that come together in terms of opportunities, particularly around open source as well.
Well, as in, I work for Siemens. It's astonishingly hard to believe, and their worst employee. But I work for Siemens, and the idea of does such a good job. We are 100 years in Ireland this month, so
wow.
Go us.
Congratulations.
So thank you very much for all your hard work in keeping us. Obviously the Irish ecosystem is doing something incredibly good, that we have so many multinationals here, and I'm interested to explore too a little bit about how important the ecosystem is in attracting them, but also keeping them and maintaining that stickiness. So I'm going to go wide for a minute and talk about open innovation and the principles of it. So not open source specifically, but open innovation, because it is very much around the ecosystem. And so when I think of it, I think always of my old friends at Open Innovation. Martin Curley told me, I remember years ago we did this event, and it was on the quadruple helix of innovation. So we all know what that is, and you've all kind of taken on it. So we've got CivicActions, which is civic engagement, universities and business and government. So even without Jane here, who is greatly missed, but we have this great representation. And so can you talk to me a little bit, John, actually starting with you then, from that government perspective with this interface with industry. How important is it that we present this ecosystem and make it accessible in attracting large companies, and how good our companies are responding to that and coming outside all of them driven by profit and bottom line,
Yeah, yes.
proprietary mindset.
Yeah, so I think one of the big things that has been very successful from RDA's perspective has been that whole idea of the ecosystem within Ireland and the collaboration piece within it. And I think, like, when we talk to many multinationals, particularly move in for the first time, the one thing that really that sticks with them is like, wow, like you have a really integrated system here between academic, government, and industry. And like they call it the triple helix, but really it is very engaged. You know, you get quick access to government, you get quick access to industry, you get quick access into the university sector. One of the big things that they found too is, which has worked really well, I'm sure Siemens has experienced that, is the third level sector within Ireland works very close with industry to develop kind of custom courses and specialist areas that's in it, in areas of innovation, now in areas of AI, but also that idea too of an open collaboration piece. And so we have companies such as Red Hat, for example, as they're big proponents of open source. They have a huge operation down in Waterford, and they've kind of pioneered this. What I really like, it's a really nice example of people get a chance to find out about it, where they work closely with the university down there for a really tailored program around innovation with students, and particularly with a focus on open source and that whole ecosystem that's around it. And it's a really clever way to bring that fusion in, and it's something that, like, from an industry perspective, we're very happy kind of engaging in that. But that is, it's a key calling card, because a lot of companies, for the first time moving in, they go, well, why Ireland? And particularly in the world of tech, well, why Ireland for AI? Sure, like, there's no AI in Ireland, sure, there's no AI, you know. So you have to show that there's that wide ecosystem, and then we say, well, look, we've companies like Siemens, for example, they've been here 100 years. Like, if they're here and they're a big name, people recognize that. Or Microsoft have been here for so long, IBM have been here 75 years, Ericsson, I think, was 50. So like Intel. So like all of that is there. And so it's that, I think that's something that strikes people too, is that you've got this huge ecosystem of all particular technologies across multiple domains that's in it. And then people go, well, if they're there, maybe I'm missing out on something. And then they come and they find the whole ecosystem. And I think it is, the ecosystem tends to be kind of a unique thing in that sense.
I think that's to Martin's point, actually, just when he finished, he said we've got a huge diaspora. I think one of the things that we have here as a country that facilitates it, you can have those elements, but if they're not talking to one another, it doesn't work. I think the fact that we've got 2 degrees of separation around here is actually also helpful. But it's, you did mention the triple, and you didn't mention the quadruple. The fourth element is that civic engagement piece.
That's true.
And that is really interesting when we look at some of the challenges and the world as it is right now, and the chaos, and that we're in the government piece as well. And we've talked a little bit about, in previous panels around digital identity cards and passports and stuff like that. And it's a huge trust involved by citizens to engage with services that are, and to engage in the development of them as well. So to that point, I think both of you guys have perspectives, certainly from the city perspective, but also from the citizen engagement side. I'm going to give you a break because you were on the last panel, but I'm going to come to you. I will, because I want to talk about Paris. But I want to talk to you about this civic engagement piece, and also then around, how does that knock on then in terms of procurement and getting people involved and getting government to buy into and trust in all of this. So, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
For sure. So certainly we are engaged in civic tech, but we're also business. And I was one of the founders of Civic Tech Ottawa. Definitely appreciate the movement of that. We regularly go to things like Code for America. But it's we work for some of the largest government clients, the largest governments in the world. So CMS.gov, VA.gov, NSF.gov, like a lot of large government agencies. Between the VA and CMS, I think there's about 180 million Americans that are served through having healthcare through those services. So it's quite impressive just the scale of the impact that we're able to have through these, by supporting these agencies. But procurement is a real challenge, and it's something that we're working to address, because right now, although there's been a move to more easily buy open source software from government, for government, and have government be using open source software, there hasn't been a real understanding that you actually have to buy from people who know the software and are contributing back to it. So often governments are buying software from people who will use it, but not they're buying from the takers rather than the makers. because the takers can be cheaper because they're not investing back in the infrastructure. And in fact, often the takers will go off and take an open source project, and then they will customize it and fork it and make it even actually more difficult to maintain because they're not committed to making sure that it is standards compliant and open source and public going ahead. So there's a cost challenge as well, where you can take an open source project and quickly make it an almost proprietary system.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's that choice, isn't it, in terms of investment? It's like, make it yourself or take the open source. But if you make it so proprietary in the end that it stops being open, then it's not repeatable, it's not reusable, it's not scalable to anybody else.
You get the same kind of vendor lock-in that you would from a proprietary solution, even if you have a vendor that doesn't understand contributing back to the ecosystem. And you often have things where you've got outdated libraries that produce security problems. So we're working to reform procurement in the U.S. We got a contract to help both train procurement officers and update the guides that we're using to educate procurement officers around agile digital procurement best practices.
Now, I want to talk about, actually, just to that point, because in my head, this is where it comes from not being an expert, it's really useful. So you've got, so this technical training. I used to work in global sourcing procurement myself many years ago from another multinational who's been here a long time, Beckton Dickinson.
Very good.
Yeah, just like so many years. But it's a mindset thing though, isn't it? Mm-hmm. One of the things that I've remarked upon about today is that open source it's an open data. It's a mindset, it's a concept, it's a community, it is a way of doing things, it's a way about thinking about the world. And dare I say it, large-scale capitalism is like the antithesis of community. It's about me, you're laughing, but you know I'm right. And it is the absolute opposite to that. You know, we talk a good talk, you know, about certain things, but in the end of the day, it's bottom line, and it's not triple bottom line. It's not that bit about, you know, where society wins. A lot of it is where I win, where I make most money. And actually, open, and the heart of open and this idea it's a change in leadership, it's a change in mindset. Yeah. So you can train people on the technical challenges of buying into open and buying and building through open. But what do we need to do at the very, very top from a leadership point of view to get people to buy into the economic side?
Well, I think so much comes down to having that commitment to where are your allies? So small businesses are definitely something that every political party believes in and wants to invest in. And small businesses will have a competitive advantage if they take on ambitious digital products if they're using open source. That's not possible in a proprietary system. You can't, there's just not the resources to build or maintain complicated systems. So that's really one way, but also just trying to structure it so that you're finding whatever innovations another angle. It's like, well, if you want to be able to innovate, you shouldn't be starting from scratch. You should be starting halfway up the mountain or near the top of the mountain if you want to go from succeed, as opposed to every project starting from the base, the base camp and trying to work their way up from the ground, from sea level, right?
Yeah, I think that's. I know we're talking IDA, but also like a lot. I've often felt that there's a great opportunity we have. And I'm going to pretend I'm Jane Dillon, who's also meant to be on this panel, which is upset. So I'm Jane, and I work for Enterprise Ireland, and we support Indigenous Irish businesses, and a lot of those are mid-sized companies, notwithstanding the global food companies, but mid-sized companies. And I feel that they are missing out on they have a huge opportunity to leapfrog large multinationals as disruptors. They are not weighed down by these global economies of scale, in terms of, and there's a kind of a diseconomy as well. Like it's like you've got all these legacy systems, and to make all these changes is huge. They've got this nimble, fast ability to be able to take on new technologies, and open makes that easier again. And they have, when we're talking about building unicorns out of Ireland, it doesn't have to be one that's born out of nowhere tomorrow. It can be an existing SME business who decides to just go for it. Do you see that as a real, and actually I'm going to bring Sayeed in on this, do you see this as a real possibility, or am I just being gloriously optimistic? Little Pollyanna moment.
No, I definitely think there's something there. And I'll take a step back first and try and sort of incorporate everything we've discussed. That one of the funders for some of the work we're doing at Carnegie Mellon is a group called Novo Reach Foundation. and their CEO's name is Arun Gupta, and he's written a book called Venture Meets Mission, and it's basically about how do you take the small startup mindset approach, nimbleness, whatever you want to call it, and work with the federal government in the United States, right? And there's a section in it that talks about trust and actually factors that can erode trust, right? So think about time scale, right? Government, at least in theory, likes to think for decades, long investments, long-term infrastructure, so on, whereas startups report every quarter or whatever the case may be, and actually develop on the even shorter time scale, or the tolerance for risk, or the way they're evaluated for success. All these things are very different in those two different worlds. And then if you bring universities into the mix, I like to believe that we're somewhere in between. I don't know if people remember, was it Goldilocks story, or one bed being too hard, one bed being too soft, one being just right. I like to think academia is just right, in that we have people who think of long-term research, basic questions like AI, but also do tech transfer. Think about shorter time scales. So maybe academia is a way to bridge all those different kinds of uncertainties, if you will. But I also think open source is a way to harmonize that and flatten the landscape. So if you're all going to work on an open source project, and you show up and say, well, we'll wait 10 years for the next feature to come out. Chances are it won't be very successful. I mean, you can do that if you want. That is a way of saying to a federal government official that, no, we do things agile, right? We have to speed this up. So in order to participate in that substrate, if I can call it that, right, you all have to compromise in terms of your preference, your comfort levels, your risk preferences, and so on. And I do think that that is a way for a small entity, a small business, to have disproportionate impact. If you have to sign a contract with a government or a university or so on, it's a very different way of interacting. So I do think that, and in the US, I think it's 2/3 of all jobs are created by small businesses. So we have a very strong incentive to support this very important ecosystem and engage, to give them better ways and easier ways to engage.
I think that's one of the things. I used to run a technology research center here, IC4, the Center for Cloud Computing and Commerce. Very, very career. And one of the challenges we always had with projects is when you've got a large multinational engaging with a smaller partner, when you're doing something like a Horizon Europe project or the Disruptive Technology Innovation Fund, any of that, there is a nervousness around IP. There's a nervousness that the smaller person is going to get swallowed up, that they will end up, they don't have as much cash to put on the table, they'll end up putting in a lot of the effort and someone else will walk away. So the university has a very particular role to play as a kind of honest broker. But then, and I'm not going to be mean here, but I'm going to be mean here and say sometimes universities are not that virtuous in that either, and actually can get a bit greedy about owning IP and doing spin-outs. So we've got these conflicting, I can say this now because I don't work for one anymore, but you've kind of got these conflicting KPIs where everybody wants to own something, and how am I on the make on it, and who's going to win? So do you see, is that the same similar challenge that you guys have in the US, or is that just uniquely my cynicism here?
I don't think it's unique to here.
Oh, good to know. Good to know.
It's certainly true in the US. I suspect it's true in other countries as well. What I would say is, again, when dealing with faculty in particular, we offer a set of choices. We don't tell them what to do, but we explain the consequences of those choices, right? So you want to hold on to the IP. You can't then say, I want a community of contributors, right? Because with each one of them, you're going to sign a contract. And you can do that if you want. But if your goal is to get more contributors, then saying I'm going to commercialize the IP and have legal contracts with all of them is going to slow down that goal. And then they start to think, oh, okay, there's a trade-off here. Yes, that's exactly right. There are trade-offs in the choices you're making. And we've been very clear in dealing with technology transfer office at Carnegie Mellon. We're not out there advocating for one or the other. We're just explaining that you're saying these are your goals. And then what we're saying to you is the choices you think you're making to reach those goals may not be in alignment.
And actually, I think that's something we're starting to see happening now in Ireland too, where we've noticed some of the universities now where they go to talk, particularly to US multinationals, because once the lawyers get involved and they hear the word IP, they just freak out. Right? So but what we often now have seen is that a lot of the companies now are being more realistic. They're thinking, okay, well look, if it's an open source piece here, there's a win-win here. So from an industry perspective, they have the piece, and from the university perspective, there's not a fear of working together because the IP issue isn't there. So, and then the researchers get to work on some of the leading technologies. They get access to some of the data that they would normally have done. And so, but again, like there's the mind shift change, or sometimes in the universities, like, but I'm not having IP out of this, and maybe there was something there. And you're like, yeah, but like you've got the benefits of working with a company, and like there's a bigger win that's out of this where it's a win-win. And there is that piece of a journey, and I've seen some of the universities have been much more engaging on that. And ironically, well, this just really makes sense, they're the ones now that are getting the engagements from the FDIs and the SMEs, because an SME then can come into that and they don't feel as much that they're losing as much. Actually, they're probably going to gain more out of it because they can contribute in that context into the open source community, and actually it raises their recognition then globally.
I was going to say, it gives them, it's a real proof of concept for them. So we can play with big players.
Yeah.
We are more than capable of holding our own with any big players, because I think we talked about trust earlier on, and whether that's trust in the technology, but it's actually trust in the brands, and a lot of brands are built on what they've owned and what they develop, but actually the trust really comes down to a relationship and whether or not they can work together with other parties. And one of the barriers, I think, from a government procurement, and Gar is gone now because he's sick of me.
You knew you were going to ask a question.
But I remember when he started out in the HSE, the big joke and the big challenge was like, in the name of God, how do you get the public sector in Ireland, particularly within the HSE, to buy from a startup? And I know startups in this country who have had more success dealing with the NHS, with hospitals in Australia, than they have engaging with the public sector here. I think that has changed quite a lot in the last number of years.
But this is a common problem with governments around the world, and certainly in Canada.
Yeah.
And part of it comes down to those expectations. Like politicians want to go off, and the media get all excited about the billion-dollar corporations, like whether it's Stripe here or whether it's Shopify in Canada. I mean, the Trudeau, who's now selling himself as a tech prime minister, and this is something he was really excited by. He went to the Shopify offices once and did some coding at Shopify, and in his first term, and that was basically it. So it's we throw so much attention towards these big corporations, but ultimately it's about trying to say, hey, all of us, we realize that small businesses are the ones that are actually the drivers of our economy. They're the innovators, and we need to give them a chance. And we need to find ways that maybe our expectations shouldn't be creating the unicorns. Maybe unicorns aren't real. Maybe
I love this.
Maybe we need zebras, right?
Well, you know what, I heard a thing years ago. Geraldine's in the audience. She comes to congregation with us every year. Gar also, and Claire, and Dermot, loads of people. And it's an unconference. And I wrote a thing once about technology was killing creativity. And it was this idea of one of the greatest ever Irish people, women. I'm apologising. I'm having a 52-year-old woman, menopausal brain fog moment, and I cannot remember the name of the Irish woman, furniture, adjustable chair, table, famous.
Oh,
thank you. For the love of God, where's my brain? I've been to her house. I'm the whole thing. So the Eileen Gray, she designed the dragon chair. That I can remember. Sold for 14 million to each on their own. The dragon chair exists. Dragon, mythical creature. The chair still exists. Unicorns, also mythical creatures. And I'm looking at them, but why are we chasing unicorns? Why don't we chase dragons? They're real. Like chase the real design, really great creativity and talent. You know, this idea of unicorns is just like nonsense.
Dragons aren't really either.
Dragons aren't really either. So I guess my point is there was a kind of the chair is real. Yes. You know what I mean? The chair actually exists. We're creating all these digital businesses, and let's look at a lot of the unicorns are entirely digital. Yeah. And I look at some of the sectors in Ireland where we're really, really strong. And there's a physical thing there. It's food and beverage. We're really, really good at stuff like that. And people will always need to eat. So I just think this constant chasing for this tech unicorn is there, I know we're at a tech conference, but like it doesn't always have to be about that. And a lot of it is taking technology and bringing it into other sectors. And there's this sense that we're creating this, there's the tech sector and there's everybody else. and that we'll have this echo chamber of tech talking to tech talking to tech, and not getting it deployed into companies that are not perceived as technology companies, and them getting somewhat left behind. And I looked then at the SME sector and where we could deploy technology into those to allow them to scale and grow, that it doesn't become exclusionary, and that this idea of unicorns, that they're all tech companies. Sorry, that was a long one. The island grey thing threw me.
Well, I would say on that side, like, it is something that it is now you're starting to see kind of that shift where in traditional sectors now, particularly through the use of AI and different things, there's realization you can start embedding these technologies into other sectors.
Yeah.
And there is a bit control, but what makes it possible, particularly for the SME side, is the open source piece of it. Because now they can get access to a technology that's free, but they can build on it, and they can build something around their business, around their area of expertise, and their unique piece of knowledge on it. And that gives them then that unique selling point then about building a product or a service that complements the areas in their other sectors with that, and deliver enhanced value. And that only really makes it possible through a lot of the times through open source models, where they can now leverage that technology to shape something different for the business. So like my own views, I think we're actually at a really exciting inflection point that can come out, and I think there's a lot of potential across all of the non-tech sectors to leverage it as a complement going forward. That'd be my own view.
No, but I mean, I think that is the thing, because there's a lot of tech companies here, and I would love to see non-technology companies attending more tech events to understand where they can deploy, because one of the big things is we can do all of this, but if we can't get people adopting the technology, we're at nothing. And the public sector become almost like an obvious choice. Well, we have to sell to them because it's too hard to get into the private sector. Hard enough. So I've kind of come back to you. Tell me about Paris.
I'll get to Paris.
Okay.
So one thing to point out is this open source program office concept that I'm leading at Carnegie Mellon actually came out of the private sector, roughly a decade ago. And there are many Fortune 500 companies in the U.S. that have hospitals that have nothing to do with software, right? So American Airlines, Walmart, companies that are not technology companies per se. They might think of themselves that way, but they're not in the public mind technology companies. So it is in some sense permeating its way into all these other sectors. But coming back to the subject of trust, if you think about the food industry, for example, in the U.S., when something gets planted all the way to delivered to the grocery store and somebody eats it, there is an existing framework for safety testing, evaluation, regulation, and so on. That's how the trust gets conveyed, right? We don't have that yet with software. We certainly don't have that with AI, right? So we don't have the ability to say, here is a piece of code that Sayeed wrote that went all the way through the supply chain to here. And oh, by the way, Sayeed's a terrible developer. You should not have incorporated that. What are you, crazy? So the trust has to come through other mechanisms. And I think it's really important if you get this mix of civic organizations, small companies, universities, government, so on. People trust them all in different ways. And people interact with them at different points of that trust journey, right? And that's a really important part of trying to make those connections happen, because if you say, we are working with a civic organization, some people in the community say, okay, I don't trust the university, but I'll trust a civic organization.
Do you think we're at an interesting, I mean, we all know we're at a globally very interesting time right now when it comes to trust. And I remember years ago when they were launching the gov.ie identity card, and there was a brouhaha. And I was in the IA at the time, and I'm going, the name of God are people getting such a tiz about? Like, they've shared their entire lives with Elon Musk. And I mean, I know with Elon Musk at the time, with Mark Zuckerberg on Facebook. And I'm going, so they're trusting him, who's accountable to no one other than his own bank account, over the democratically elected government that they actually elected. Interesting where we have where we're leaving our trust. And
I will point out that when TikTok was temporarily shut down for
a couple of
6
hours,
hours or whatever it was in the United States, many people in the United States, I assume of a certain age range, moved to, what is it, Red Note?
Red Note,
which is also owned by ByteDance, which is based in China. Most of the content was in Mandarin because it's meant for people in China. And young people were downloading Duolingo to learn Mandarin so they could access the content. And then Red Note started having transcriptions in English. And of course, many people in the US were wondering, what is going on here? And one, it's not done rigorously yet, so I hope it is done as a rigorous academic study, if you will, but initial evidence is that many young people in the United States said, we have less concerns about our data being in the Chinese government than we do with Mark Zuckerberg.
I'm
So
with you.
I think this is starting to change. I'm not sure that's the direction we want to go, but I do think it's starting. They don't necessarily go into Facebook and change all the settings that the EFF tells you to change so that your data is being sold, but they have a sense of, yeah, my data is being used in ways I don't want, and if there's another place where it's being used in ways I don't want, I'm going to start comparing.
Yeah.
This goes on.
Yeah, absolutely. But people are looking for places where their data is being collected where they don't necessarily know what's being collected. Smart cars collect a lot of information. Mozilla has an interesting study about all the kinds of data that's being collected on us from our cars, because they have a lot of personal information that they gather just by sitting there and driving. Where you're going, how fast you're going, where there's a
Your
lot.
attitude to risk.
Yeah. But
Well, no, I'm serious. Your driving has a lot. It says a lot about your attitude
It
to
does,
risk.
absolutely. But there's some things we're not aware of. But it was interesting going to Estonia and talking with them as well as to Taiwan, and sort of seeing what some of these countries that are on the vanguard of digital government are going to, and both of them are also taking a really careful effort to think about democracy and how do we try and make sure that democracy is buttressed to be able to withstand the technological innovation that's happening right now.
Yeah.
Because we're talking about these challenges of social media and distractions that are coming through this technological media that's there. And it is reasonable to worry what is going to happen when people who are losing their literacy because they spend more time watching YouTube than they do reading books. And like there's interesting challenges that we're going to be faced with as a society. And I think that we should be thinking about how do we want to build together? What is the society we want to move towards as a positive goal that we can try and reach to together?
I think that's reminding me of, we all know about enshittification as the word of the year. I was less concerned about enshittification as a word of the year. I was less worried about that one as opposed to the other word of the year last year, Oxford, was brain rot. And the idea that I'm less worried about the AI getting consciousness and more concerned about us losing ours. And so this is why I want to talk about Paris. This is why I want to talk about Paris, because I had an epiphany in Paris. I was out for a run, and I was there for a month, and I was doing a painting course, portrait of a walk, and I noticed over that month that I was there, all these young people making TikToks and reels and selfies in front of phenomenally important and significant historic monuments, and I realized they were missing it all. They were treating everything like a tick box. It's like, I've been here, I've done that, and I've taken the photograph, sent selfie, and now I've told you. And they're not in the moment, they're not taking it in. And all I could hear, I was running, and I was thinking, what is it? And Paulie O'Reilly, an academic down in UCC, who I just adore, everything he writes, he's brilliant. And he was talking about how we oversimplify things, and we over-rely on data for all this. And I said, what gets measured doesn't get managed as much as it gets missed. We're so focused on collecting data, we're not in the moment. And I think actually being conscious and in the moment and mindful and aware is a huge part of how we're going to make better choices. We're going to be our eyes more wide open to what technology we're going to engage in, what companies we're going to trade with, how we're going to trust government, how we're going to make better choices. My biggest challenge right now is the brain rot, not the enshittification of the stuff that they're giving us, but that we're enshittifying ourselves. Like, we're the ones that are losing that kind of consciousness. And it was Paris, was that moment of what gets measured gets missed.
I guess what I'd have to say is we have to give people better stories, right? So it's a dopamine hit, whatever. It's all those different things. It's hard to compete with, but I'm struck that Estonia has 100% now digital services, right? So the work that I was involved in when I was at Johns Hopkins is working in the city of Paris on a platform called Vitesse, which is their digital government platform. And we were working with a local community center in West Baltimore called the St. Francis Neighborhood Center. And the idea was to take Vitesse and deploy it at the community center and provide kinds of services that a government might provide for citizens. Many of them are similar to things a community center might want to do with its local community. And what was interesting about that is we were again able to take the best of breed, if you will, or the comparative advantage. Oh, what about data? Well, this system is in France. It's compliant with GDPR. Oh, okay, that's better than anything we do in the US. Since we don't do anything in the US, yes, it is by definition better. What about the way we're going to work together? It's under BSD license. Well, what if we don't like that license? We don't have to work with it. What if we want to change it? Good luck. So you go to the open source initiative and try to change the BSD license. So there are all these mechanisms that were in place where, and I don't mean to sound subversive or something, but my administration...
Well, please, you should be subversive. I'm all
my
for it.
administration kept putting up these questions, and I would keep saying, look, here you go, this is how we'll deal with this. And we never finished that work, which is unfortunate, but I hope it does get picked up again. The application that we thought of in Baltimore was helping homeless people find shelters. Because right now, the way that happens is they go to one shelter, and that shelter may be full.
Yeah.
You call another shelter director. You call another shelter director. We can do better, right? And this was very humbling and illuminating for me. It's not as simple as where is their bed available. Sadly, some of them have kids, so you have to have a shelter that takes kids, or a shelter that's only for women, or shelters that have plugs near the bed. Some people actually have devices, medical devices. All of these things could, as I said, I hope it eventually happens, I'm not Hopkins anymore, could lead to a much better story about what can you do with your data and open source software and this quad helix coming together, where you'd like to think that people will think, yeah, that's kind of cool. It's at least as good as me taking a picture by the loop.
Yeah, I think trust, and then that comes back down to, again, trust by service users, and that involves bringing community. Because for all of the multinationals that we have here, they're fundamentally selling to consumers. Or they're not, they're selling to another business who's trying to sell to a consumer. And in the same way as we want that farm to fork, and we had an excellent presentation earlier on from the Department of Agriculture and how they're using data, but we want that trustworthiness in our food, in that supply chain, and we want it now more and more in all aspects of services that we engage in, because we've realized that what you're putting in our food, that is important, but equally what you're putting in our minds and implanting it, that is important. So we need that kind of chain of authenticity and truth and trust that runs through the system.
It's a great segue to digital public goods. Because digital public
I'm
goods...
so glad I could be of service.
it's an effort to try and to take open source, open data, open knowledge, and just say, let's bundle this together. Let's try and build a standard that includes things like documentation and privacy and security, and sort of provides those best practices together for digital products and services. Or actually products, not services as much. But trying to go and have that, how do we raise the bar? How do we try and make sure that we're pushing people to do more than just release code? Because releasing code isn't enough. We need to be able to we need to release good code that other people are going to want to contribute to, that other people can trust, because it's being certified by a body that's looking at this information, making sure that the community is strong.
I love that, certified by a body. So I remember a million years ago, Eamon Leonard was here earlier on today, and I was sitting on a rooftop on Dame Street. It was the early days, post-crash. Everybody in the startup and tech community was sitting on rooftops on Dame Street or somewhere around Thomas Street. And we were sitting there with this group of kind of renegades probably at the time, Eamon Leonard and Damien Mully and Gavin Sheridan, people like that were there, and little old me, and I was new, and they just said, Joan, this is what we want you to do. I was the CEO of the Internet Association, so I was like a good politician. I said, right, my constituents, what do you want? We said, we want open data, we want all these kind of things. And one of the things that they were really, the antithesis to them was regulation. It was like this kryptonite to innovation. Go, no, my God, no, we can't have that kind of stuff. I think there's now, with open, there's become this happy medium.
Yeah.
You can have, because when we wanted to run then this open data conference, like, can you imagine 15 years ago in Ireland? You go, what? No. And we're talking to government about open data. And then hackathons. You can't put the word hack in a sentence to government. People that have a total conniption. They'll think you want to, overthrow the government or something. So the language has all changed. The trust is there now. And we've moved such a long way in that 10 or 15 years. But I think that it's important too that open is right. Open principle, open community, open data, open source, all open comments, all of these words. This is now, I think, the vibe, and I think, you know, the tech community have a really amazing opportunity to look at this model that has not served the world terribly well, and look at this and do that quadruple helix of innovation. But it has to be based on, there has to be some common agreed standard within that we can all buy into, that it's not open, that is just like totally Wild West. As you say, like that bit in America, you get GDPR or nothing at all. It's that middle ground that provides a solid base for people, that builds trust for people. I shouldn't have the last word, so I'm going to have you guys have the last word. We're going to start with John. This open source, this was the title of our topic, did you know? It was open source and national innovation ecosystems. What would be one thing, so you've given up your day to be here today, what would be one thing you would like this audience, or the people who are listening to it later on, because I just realised we're being filmed on our pod, you can't edit some of this out. The menopausal moment, that's not good, that's good. Okay, so what would be the one thing that you would like this room and anyone else listening in to know about Ireland, from an IDA perspective, about our ecosystem, that you think is particular or special?
So I think what I have took from like meeting with so many companies, and just the culture piece is the one that comes across the most. When you're working with an industry, it is about the stories, it's about the people, it's about how you work together. And I think that's something that, if you're looking at Ireland, it does have something really unique around that, is that wide culture interaction between it. And we see it here, like we've become a hugely multicultural country that's there. Like, there's 140 different nationalities plus, I think, in the last census, all in a tiny little country. Like, that is a strong message to give out there. And people have made it a home, and they've made it now part of the technology. And that drives innovation. And that drives new ideas and new methodologies and new approaches to things. And I think that's really is what you need, is that really mix of that broader international culture is a big part to drive innovation.
And not only do we have it, but unlike a lot of the world right now, we welcome it.
We do.
And I think that is really important about how we are viewed in the world right now. We are very stable for a lot of it. It's not perfect, but that is one thing that we are good on. You know, in that sense.
That human piece that
that's really good. Sayeed, what would you like this audience to know? You've come the whole way over to be here.
I wouldn't presume to tell you about Ireland.
No, I don't want you to tell us about Ireland. What is the one thing that's made you give up your time to be here? Like, this is a huge thing, and we're really grateful that you have joined us and worked so hard on so many panels today.
So I'll try to think of how to say this, in that we need good role models to emulate, given what we're going through in the US. So it's been very inspiring to see what you're doing.
Oh, thank you. I'll tell Claire.
I think there's so much opportunity in this country with the spontaneous collisions that can happen, because there is so much here. It is a beautiful, vibrant, interesting, educated city doing so much interesting stuff. So that's one piece of it. But yeah, I think that you're absolutely right that we need examples of governments who are successful. And having listened to Tony Shannon and others speak today, there's so much. I'm very optimistic about what is going to happen here, and I haven't seen something like this in Canada or the U.S. There are other kinds of efforts to try and do this, but not as rich in terms of the content or the experience. So that's all very useful. And I know that certainly in Canada and the U.S. that Ireland does have we definitely look to Ireland, and there's a lot of people with connections to Ireland, not just on St. Patrick's Day, but there's between the Shamrock Summit, people probably don't remember what that was, but it was Ronald Reagan and Brian Mulroney had a conference that happened on St. Patrick's Day, and they both you can watch them both singing, but Irish eyes are shining, right? And so it is important for both of our countries in North America to have that connection and bond, even between our leadership, and I know that is something that will, it holds true for a lot of people, that there's innovation and ideas, and having a country that is so welcoming but also so global. where are you going to go in the world and not find somebody celebrating St. Patrick's Day? Like there's a pub somewhere celebrating St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah. No, we do. We have a really powerful diaspora, and we have a really the opposite to diaspora in terms of what we have here is we've got all these new Irish people, but I think all of that is it is almost the physical embodiment of what open is all about. And so we are above all an open economy. We are an open society, and I think our attitude to open source and open data is just a reflection and a mirror of that. And I think that's a really, really positive thing. And I think one of the things from a government point of view and that citizen engagement piece is, I think it would be magic if more citizens knew from people in the tech community how good the work that is being done at government level. I know it's not about elected officials, it is about the public sector in Ireland. It is imperfect. It is imperfect everywhere in the world. They are all behemoth, colossal bureaucratic organizations. But there are good people working in it here who are trying to do really, really good things, and it is hard and it is challenging, but I think that there is genuinely a mindset for that. And I think, on that happy note, I do have a responsibility. Apparently it came through my WhatsApp. I was anyway, of course. I mean, obviously I know to thank the three of you for your time and for fantastic contributions on this panel, which has been appallingly badly facilitated by me, but nonetheless, I want to thank all of you for attending. But just to that wider audience out there, Claire Dillon asked you to do something, the answer is yes. She's small, but she's terrifying in the very nicest possible way. And they will name a storm after her the next week. But it is a real community. I think. I mean, I said earlier on, I was here half an hour. I said, "Shh, I'm here for the hugs today." Like I've met so many people I haven't seen in a long time. It has been a fantastic event. I think throughout the whole day. Thank you all so much for being part of it, because I think it's almost felt like an unconference in a way. Everybody has been part of it. So I have to thank the organisers. I have to thank all of the sponsors, which I should probably, they're probably on this, aren't they? No, they're not. So I don't know, but go read a banner. That's terrible, isn't it? I'm a terrible MC. But thank you all very, very much. There should be a QR code going up on the screen somewhere to get people to sign up. I'm just going to ask my lovely technical assistant. He's been triple jumping all day. Is there a slide there with a QR code on it? That slide that's gone in front, it was hanging in front of my face there for a while. It was very disconcerting. There's part of that bit's been filmed around cross-eyed, which I know.
I'm not seeing it.
Oh well, there is something. Maybe there's something on the notes.
Just imagine a QR code.
Just imagine a QR code. Exactly. If anyone asks, go to another room, find the screen, download the QR code. Let me just don't go anywhere because I could get fired. Ask the last panel moderator, thank everyone, Dan, ask them to sign up. QR code. I tried. Fun part. Let's collaborate more in the reception. So there's a drinks reception. There's always a drinks reception.
That's very important, like that.
Is it a reception when it's at the end of the day? Is that just receiving?
Yes.
I don't know. We can't call it a deception. That's bad.
No, it
would be a deception if there's no booze at the reception.
You can call it a party.
The party, the after party. Go forth and that's still.
I couldn't find it, sorry.
But that's nice. I like that.
Improvised.
I like that. Thank you all very much for listening. These have been fabulous. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Okay, great.